everyone. You're listening to Alternative Revelations with Linda Emmanuel. And you're listening to podcast number 11, all about coconut oil and carnivora and why they are effective against mycoplasma. These are the last podcasts I will do about plant-based defense, and then I will move on to other protocols that kill mycoplasma. But first, before I go on, I have to put this disclaimer in so the FDA or the government will not shut me down. I am not a licensed practitioner, nor am I a doctor. I cannot give medical advice. And these podcasts are for informational purposes only. Also, I hope you listen to podcast number 2. This is a very important podcast that shouldn't be skipped because it is your foundation to understanding how mycoplasma works. Also, if you're interested in plant-based protocols, please do not skip podcast number 3, 4, and 5, especially number 3 about alkaloids. This is your foundation as to why plants such as marijuana and the tobacco plant kill mycoplasma. Now, on with the podcast. It is mind-boggling how God, our Creator, has put so many things on earth, and everything has a purpose. Even the disease-causing bacteria, mycoplasma, they have a purpose. They break down dead bodies. God probably also knew that things could get out of hand, that when the organism breaks down a body, a dead body, this is called decomposition. But the organism can also attack somebody alive, and then this is called cancer or disease. So God put many defenses against these bad bacteria available to us, and we just have to discover them and have the knowledge and the tools so we can protect ourselves from this organism breaking down our body while we are alive. And one of the defense mechanisms that God created was in the coconut, the medium chain fatty acids. And that is the key word here, lipid or fat. And for your information, I'm going to remind you from podcast 2 that mycoplasma is encased in a double cell membrane. It does not have a cell wall. The membrane is made of a lipid and sugars, and this is why it is vulnerable. Remember the key word, fat, and that is the mycoplasma's Achilles heel. And coconut oil and carnivora do not contain alkaloids, cyanogenic glycosides, or glucosinolates, yet they are effective against mycoplasma. And the following is why. The oil in coconuts is saturated, and 92% of its fat is medium chain fatty acids. Now, coconut oil in and of itself is not antimicrobial until the body breaks it down into monoglycerides and free fatty acids in the digestive tract. Now, the following I'm going to quote from Dr. Bruce Fife's book, Coconut Cures, and this refers to mycoplasma. Medium chain fatty acids and monoglycerides are absorbed into the organism's outer membrane. These fats have a destabilizing effect which weakens the membrane to the point that it dissolves and falls apart, killing the organism. Bacteria cannot develop resistance to this type of action. Now, studies have also verified what Dr. Fife claimed. They have seen and witnessed medium chain fatty acids dissolving mycoplasma membrane. So to sum it up, mycoplasma cannot use medium chain fatty acids to replicate. It needs those bad fats, those long chain fatty acids that the food industry has pushed on us for the last 40 years. I'll give you a little trivia. In the 1980s, a media campaign against saturated fat coconut and palm oil started, condemning it, saying it was bad for us. Instead, unsaturated fats especially soybean and canola, were pushed onto the American people, which in reality, research has proven these sticky oils are indirectly and directly responsible for the following: the plaque buildup in the blood vessels, cancer and disease, and damage to the cell itself through peroxidation, which will be explained in a few minutes. Another interesting fact about medium-chain fatty acids that they are found in mother's milk for a reason. The medium-chain fatty acids protect the newborn from disease until the baby can build up his or her own immune system. And Dr. Bruce Fife suggests women who are nursing their babies to supplement their diet with coconut oil because the coconut oil helps develop the baby's brain. He also states in his book that nursing mothers who do not eat coconut oil will only provide around 4% medium-chain fatty acids. But if they ingest coconut oil, medium-chain fatty acids will jump to a whopping 18% in the milk. So the emphasis here is coconut oil helps develop the brain, and actually the brain is 75% fat. And I'm also going to add a little comment here. It makes me wonder that with all the people eating this unsaturated fat, which I will explain to be so unhealthy for you and dangerous to your health, that it's no wonder that people are so dumbed down. I wonder if that's the reason. What do you think? So back to the podcast. So I'm going to get into peroxidation, why eating those bad fats are so dangerous to your health. And I first have to explain that coconut and palm oil are saturated fat. We're going to talk about peroxidation, which involves polyunsaturated and monounsaturated. The key word here is the unsaturated fat. Polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fatty acids require processing by the pancreatic enzymes and liver bile to break them down into usable molecules. After leaving the stomach and entering the intestinal tract, the long-chain fatty acids are broken down into lipoproteins. After processing, the lipoproteins are absorbed through the intestinal walls into the bloodstream and begin circulating. As the lipoproteins circulate, fat is released. There has been many research studies about unsaturated fat and peroxidation. And the following is Wikipedia's definition of lipid peroxidation. And here goes. Lipid peroxidation refers to the oxidative degradation of lipids. It is the process in which free radicals steal elements from the lipids in cell membranes, resulting in cell damage. This process proceeds by a free radical chain reaction mechanism. It most often affects polyunsaturated fatty acids. If not terminated fast enough, there will be damage to the cell membrane, which consists mainly of lipids. In addition, end products of lipid peroxidation may be carcinogenic. And the following is a list of plants that contain polyunsaturated fat that will boggle your mind. Walnut oil, sunflower oil, sesame seed oil, corn oil, flaxseed oil, safflower oil, canola, which is the rapeseed oil, cottonseed oil, peanut oil, olive oil, which is 25% polyunsaturated, and soybean oil. These are all polyunsaturated fat. Now, according to Wikipedia, I'm going to quote, polyunsaturated fat can be found mostly in nuts, seeds, fish, algae, leafy greens, and krill. Whole food sources are best, as the more processing and heating may damage polyunsaturated fats. So in other words, when you heat polyunsaturated oil as to fry, let's say, French fries or fry chicken, this can lead to damaging the polyunsaturated oil, and it can become rancid and also lead to peroxidation, which will damage the cells. Also, I'm going to remind you that peroxidation involves polyunsaturated fat and monounsaturated fat. And Wikipedia claims or states that monounsaturated fat is found in red meat, whole milk, nuts, olives, avocados, peanuts, macadamia nuts, almonds, sunflower seeds, sesame seeds, whole grain wheat, and oatmeal. So again, the key word here is overprocessing seeds to cause rancidness or peroxidation. So not to be confusing, many of the aforementioned oils have a combination of both polyunsaturated and monounsaturated. For example, olive oil is 75% monounsaturated fat and 25% polyunsaturated fat. So here's a little interesting fact I found when I was researching coconut oil, polyunsaturated fat, and monounsaturated fat, that polyunsaturated fat is used as paint stock oils because they are sticky. These include safflower, corn, soy, and linseed oil. Polyunsaturated fat help paint stick to the surface. And because of this stickiness in polyunsaturated fats, it is believed that polyunsaturated fats may increase the risk of metastasis in cancer patients, that polyunsaturated fat increase adherence of circulating tumor cells to blood vessel walls and remote organs. So again, the emphasis here is when you eat polyunsaturated fat, which is sticky, this may contribute to heart disease and the spread of mycoplasma and tumors. And for your information, mycoplasma has no way to maneuver around. It totally relies on blood flow. And by the way, it loves couch potatoes because blood circulation has slowed down, giving it a chance to adhere to either a blood vessel or a cell wall. Now I'm going to get into how polyunsaturated fat negatively affects the thyroid. And according to a Dr. Raymond Peat, that he explains that unsaturated fat suppresses the metabolic rate, which creates hypothyroidism. Dr. Peat states, unsaturated oil specifically suppresses tissue response to the thyroid hormone and the transport of hormones. He goes on to state that seeds have built-in chemical defenses that can block digestive enzymes in the stomach. He also states that the thyroid gland uses an enzyme to make hormones and that unsaturated fat inhibits the thyroid enzyme. He further goes on to say in an article that he wrote about coconut oil that coconut oil supports the thyroid function and the thyroid determines brain development. In his article, he also states that the suppression of the thyroid gland raises serum cholesterol. He explains that a 1930 study revealed when the thyroid gland is functioning properly and producing hormones, there will be no excess cholesterol in the blood. And this is something I did not cover in podcast 2, how mycoplasma can wreak havoc on the endocrine system, causing hormone imbalance. This happens because, again, mycoplasma needs fat to replicate, and the easiest place in the body to find cholesterol is in the endocrine system where you make hormones. And for your information, fat is a major component of a hormone. And I'm going to read you Wikipedia's definition of the endocrine system if you don't know what it is. The endocrine system is made up of a series of glands that produce chemicals called hormones. And when the mycoplasma uptakes the cholesterol in the gland, and that particular gland is unable to make hormones, and mycoplasma can attack or be in any gland in the body and uptake cholesterol, therefore robbing you of cholesterol. And for example, if it is in the hypothalamus, you might find that you cannot regulate your body temperature. You also might not be able to sleep even though you are exhausted. Hormones regulate mood. Hormones regulate the intake of glucose, as like in insulin. And the list goes on. Your body is just run by hormones, and without them, the body cannot function properly. And I would say 100% of the people who have a mycoplasma infection are suffering from some kind of hormonal imbalance. So when mycoplasma attacks the thyroid gland or just uptakes the cholesterol, people are diagnosed with Hashimoto or hypothyroid. Also, if mycoplasma attacks the degenerative thyroid, it is called Graves' disease. And for your information, President George Bush and his wife Barbara both had Graves' disease, which I thought was very interesting. They both had the genetic weakness to get this disease. And what fascinated me, just for your information, was that George Bush, the first George Bush president, he had a financial interest in a mycoplasma lab that made mycoplasma. And he was also part of the regime with Henry Kissinger, who was one of the people behind the bioweapon program development. And an interesting story here, if you read the story called Thanks for the Memories, it's about Bryce Taylor, who was in the mind control program, and Henry Kissinger. She was his computer. Back then they didn't have computers, but she actually was owned by Bob Hope, who was Henry Kissinger's best friend. But I read the story and I really thought it was interesting when Bryce mentioned that Henry Kissinger had her on tetracycline. And what's interesting is Bryce had no idea why she was on tetracycline, but of course I did, because she was a sex slave and they did not want her infecting people with mycoplasma. And she was also servicing all the dignitaries and the presidents, and this is why Henry had her on tetracycline, because he knew that mycoplasma infections were spread through the sharing of body fluids. And getting back to the podcast, mycoplasma is the smallest living organism. It is smaller than a virus. It is only the DNA strand encased in the double cell membrane of a bacterium. And if you can ever see a picture of a cell, you can see how small the nucleus of that cell is. In fact, that's how small mycoplasma is. And Wikipedia states the hypothalamus controls body temperature, hunger, thirst, fatigue, mood control, mood and depression, and sleep. And so many people are affected by mycoplasma through this gland, which is in the brain and protected by the blood-brain barrier. But mycoplasma, because it is so small, it can pass through the blood-brain barrier. And what protects us with our blood-brain barrier are the endothelial cells in the blood vessels. And I'd just like to add a little comment. So many people who have cancer and disease, and especially AIDS, waste away. So this tells me that the mycoplasma is in the hypothalamus, which controls hunger, and this is why people waste away with cancer and disease. They lose their appetite. Just thought I'd add that. That's kind of interesting. Now back to the podcast. And because mycoplasma can cross the blood-brain barrier, and now you see a lot of cases of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Lou Gehrig's, multiple sclerosis, and schizophrenia. These are all mycoplasma infections. Now here's another interesting fact about coconut oil. It improves vitamin and mineral absorption. Not only does it enhance the B vitamins, but also D, E, and K, as well as beta carotene, which is vitamin A. It also helps maximize mineral absorption, which could be magnesium and calcium. And coconut oil contains iron, sodium, and zinc. And I'd like to also add that eating coconut is another way to ingest coconut oil. There is so much more to coconuts, but this podcast is about coconut oil. And if you're interested in learning about how coconuts are so good for you, I'd suggest reading Dr. Bruce Fife's book, Coconut Cures. You can also read about coconut oil and other protocols in my book, Alternative Revelations, 3rd edition, available on Amazon.com for $14.99. And I'm sorry to say that I'm out of time. I won't be able to do Carnivora this podcast, but it will be podcast 12. And it will be an interesting podcast. You will learn the secret behind Carnivora, why President Ronald Reagan used Carnivora and got well from colon cancer. So this ends this podcast about coconut oil and why it kills mycoplasma. And I hope you learned something. I did when I studied coconut oil. It opened up a whole new world for me. So until next time, good night and God bless.